How the life story of a woman abandoned by her mother and abused by her father as a child was turned into experimental lyric poetry is the premise of a book by Janet Gallant, as told to Sharon Thesen, and published by New Star Books of Vancouver, BC. The Wig Maker is the book, and that's because a woman turned the events of her life into something that, if she could not forget, she could at least find a way to survive. Janet Gallant is the mother of two grown daughters and currently working as a wig maker in Lake Country, BC. And The Wig Maker is her first book. But after reading this gut wrenching tale, one gets the idea that this story in many ways will be hard to top. Janet, welcome to the interview.
Thank you, Paul, for having me.
Well, I'm blown away by your story. I'm grateful you're here to talk about it because many people who've gone through anything close to what you've gone through do not make it this far and do not have a happy ending to the story. And so here you are. I have to really focus on what's the task is at hand. I have to hold my emotions at bay a little bit because it is when I say gut wrenching, I mean it is gut wrenching. So thank you for being here.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Paul.
Sharon Thesen's your neighbor, and on some level you trusted her with the intimate details of your life. Can you talk about how conversations during a catastrophic fire over wine turned into a book?
You know, to this day, I still shake my head. It's hard to believe we're at this end a couple of years later. But I don't know, when women get together, especially under stress, there really is something really cool that happens. Friendships are started all the time, whether it's stress of work, stress of children. So there we were, waiting for the neighborhood to burn down, wondering if we'd have to evacuate. I'm not sure if any of us were able to drive at that at the end of the evening, but you know, when Sharon would ask me, you know, so tell me about yourself. Do you have any siblings? Where's your parents? You know, I could have come up with the easy, you know, I have a brother Ian and my parents are out east or they've passed away. But for some reason, sitting there that evening, I answered her honestly. Well, I had, you know, this many siblings, 2 were gone. And then she would just keep asking questions, and I decided to answer her honestly and wholly instead of the, you know, the quick small talk answers that I would give normally. I can't explain to you why, but it was the time. It was time.
Yeah. I want to get this out of the way very close to the beginning of this chat. And so here goes. People are potentially going to accuse Sharon Thesen of cultural appropriation in helping you tell your story because she's a white woman and you're biracial. Do you see it that way?
No, sir. No, sir. This is about sisterhood. This is about women sharing and loving each other openly and honestly. Race is a lie. I think it's a lie. Once you sit down before someone and you have a connection of any kind, race is gone. We're just 2 women sitting there together, becoming dear, dear friends. So I say to anyone who's going to come at this book with that attitude, maybe it's not the right read for you, move on.
That's a more charitable answer than I might have given, but we'll leave it.
Well, I thought I'd hold my language until we got to know each other a little bit.
Well, mi madre es una cubana, so you know I can handle more than you know. Pero mi español es mierda. What was your connection to poetry before you met Sharon?
You know, absolutely none except for music. You know, I think every song ever written is a beautiful poem. Music has gotten me through the darkest of days, and when I used to tinker with the pen, I would try to write lyrics. So that's it. I was a radio girl, you know, brought up by the 3 channels we had on the TV in Canada back then, and the radio. No, so I know nothing about poetry, and I must say when I was reviewing your site and getting to know you a little bit, looking at your past interviews, I thought, well, you're not getting a poet here today, so I'm not going to throw around any names or except for Sharon Thesen, of course. I don't think of myself as a writer or a poet. I'm just telling my story.
Well, throwing out Sharon Thesen off the bat gets you a lot of credibility in certain circles. So you're in good company. What is the kind of music that you go to when you're feeling blue?
Um, sometimes it's just a gut-wrenching love song. Sometimes, at funerals or when I'm at the lowest of low, I love that beautiful song. It's a Beautiful World. It's a Wonderful World, forgive me. Just something with movement and emotion. Hard, angry rock just has never had a place for me. It's too close to the moan, which we speak about in the book. Country music, but a lot of Motown, a lot of Michael Jackson, Diana Ross. Stevie Wonder just makes me so happy. Elton John was one of the first I ever fell in love with back in the early 70s. So a little bit of everything, depending on how the wind's blowing, I guess.
Boogie on Reggae Woman. Can I play? I love that so much. That's on my let's get in a happy mood playlist. When you saw how Sharon was beginning to construct your story, what was your first reaction?
Oh, I was terrified because I don't know anything about linear text, and I was terrified. But at the same time, I was more terrified to touch it as far as laying it out because I have no expertise there. So when it got to the story was told, and I told that poor woman everything, when it was told, then it was really natural for me just to hand it to her and trust that she would do the right thing. I stayed out of the structure of the book, laying down the actual words. For me, the hardest part was just finally telling my story. And like I said, I told Sharon everything. Poor girl.
Yeah, no, she's the right woman for the job, I think.
I think.
In an age when identity seems so important to so many people, you didn't even know you were black until age 10 or so. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I didn't, living with my stepmother and my stepsister, who were much darker. To me, I looked like a girl with brown eyes and dark hair and got a good suntan. I didn't really, and there was no discussion about my mother or the other side of my family until I said the N-word. I said the N-word to my stepsister when I was mad at her one day. Kids are terrible. And it was at that moment that my father told me, "Who do you think you are? Your mother's black. You're black too." Really, before that moment, I had no idea. And no one in my world around me, right up until I was, adult, knew either. Everywhere I went, well, where are you from? What are you? And I would make them guess. And they would guess Italian. I had all this big curly hair. Or once in a blue moon, I would guess First Nations, but no one ever guessed that I was half white, half black. Yeah.
How did things begin to change for you when that became a reality?
I don't think you notice it changing at that very moment, but I think just because society is the way it is, I certainly, and it's what I've done in every aspect of my life, I just follow the rules. And the rules were stay in your spot, I really don't feel like I've been spited. It was my decision not to get an education. It was my decision to be a young mom and get married earlier. So I don't feel that I was put aside because I was colored. And frankly, the gentlemen that I worked with, mostly men throughout my career, I've worked for some brilliant, wonderful, wonderful people who only gave me opportunities to grow in my career. So for me, it was more society things and, the gang I would hang out with. I never really figured it out, really, until I got through this book and analyzed where I was at each point in my life. And so you can imagine, in the last couple of years, I figured out my paternity, which I didn't know wasn't mine in the first place. Black Lives Matter and the colored movement is just raging through this hemisphere. And then the Me Too movement is going crazy. So all of this is going on. I finally have the courage to sit down and speak my truth. Wow, identity? Are you kidding me? I haven't got a clue who I am at this moment. I have more hope, and I feel freer than I ever have, but I don't know who I am yet. That's going to take a little bit more work.
You know, in author interviews, I'd love for people to read from the book. And I'm wondering if you have a copy of the book handy. And I'm looking at a poem called The Neighbor on page 24. Not too graphic, but I think it gives folks an idea of the content.
Okay. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Show us the cover of the book. There you go. What did it feel like when this showed up?
I've ever done this.
What did this feel like when this showed up at your front door?
It was the most amazing moment. It was, it just made it all real. And that's me when I'm probably 9, 10, no more than 10, and I won the high average for 5-pin bowling on the Army base in Downsview, Ontario. So it was actually a happy moment. Okay, page 24, The Neighbor. The next door neighbor, red-headed Irish or Scottish. I'll never forget it. I was in kindergarten and went over to play with his son. It was time to go home, so he sent his son to bed and took me down to the basement. Just like tea time with my dad. Somehow he knew I wouldn't tell. And I didn't. I'm in Toronto in grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, looking for boys' attention. Older big boys who wanted to touch me. That's what love meant. My dad was such a liar. It was all about perception. I had to be a refined lady. I never carried myself like a slut. Not even nail polish. I was perfect. I fooled them all, to the point where I fooled myself. I was fictitious. I wore nice suits. By the time you're 6, you're a double agent. That kind of stuff, Paul. I tell you, after I was finished reciting with Sharon, I've only read this book through 3 times. It's me, but it's really something to see it on page like that. Wow. Son of a bitch.
Wow is right, and that ending. I mean, the interesting thing is that the technique of how this book was written. I mean, this all comes from you, but it's like through the filter of Sharon, and she knows how to structure a poem. I mean, this indented triadic stanza kind of thing. That's a really interesting technique. I think maybe it comes out of William Carlos Williams and Asphodel, That Greeny Flower. I don't know. I'll talk to Sharon about it.
Yeah.
But how she knew to end with that line about being a double agent. By the time you're 6, you're a double agent. And, I just think I immediately think about my 9-year-old girl, and 9, she's 3 years older than you were at the time. And it's like, Mamma mia. Let's not dwell on that. Let me talk about the moan. You earlier mentioned the concept of the moan, and I'd love if you can elaborate on the symbology of that word in the context of the Wig Maker?
Well, for me, it came up early talking about Billy, because the last year of his life was so bad, and that's when he took the worst beating. Unfortunately, my psyche only held on to the poor boy's cries. I can't remember my brother's voice. I remember his cries, these horrible moans of pain, and not even physical pain as much as the horrific realization that your father's beating the shit out of you. And then when Sharon saw me through that chapter, and with her magic, she wheels over on a little chair in her office, and she pulls out a book off her shelf. She says, let me help you with this. This goes way back to, ancestors who were singing Amazing Grace on the bottom of those ships, and because this horrible circle of crap never ended, I think our souls are left with that moan, with that vibration of negativity and pain. That's what the moan means. Hoping to get through this without my Kleenex, Paul, but I don't think we're going to do that.
No,
yet.
Kleenex, I think, is a good response to this.
That's what the moan means.
Yeah,
in my heart,
it comes up again in Ian, a poem on page 69 for your brother who survived. There it is.
I have that one. I have that one flagged off already. Ian is. I'm most proud of him of all the men in my world. My little brother Ian is a rock star. He's a father of a beautiful little girl and an awesome husband, with no training, with no nurturing, with no nothing. He's amazing. He's got a smile on his face every day, always has. So, way to go, Ian. Yeah.
Would you like to read that?
Sure. How far would you like me to take this one? To the end?
Yeah.
To the end?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay.
Two pages.
All right. Ian. Look at how the children have suffered. Penny, Billy, me. Beverly was given up for adoption. Lucky for Ian, he had a psyche that protected him. Ian didn't take any beatings by my father after Billy died. He got in a fist, but nothing like Billy. Ian was good at staying out of trouble, just like me. He didn't talk back. He did what he was told. No trouble at school. He too was haunted by the moans of his brother being beaten, but his psyche was able to blank it out. 10 years later, all of a sudden he found himself sobbing for his brother. He was way too young, barely 10 years old, and lost his big brother, his roommate, grounded for smoking a cigarette. We were all addicted from my parents smoking in the house. My dad gave me a carton of cigarettes for my 15th birthday. Probably symbolic to him. As long as he could keep up with the sexual abuse, not until I left home did it stop. There's a moan out there in the universe. If you're quiet enough to listen, you hear a lot of things you don't usually hear. Penny's living with me while she's dying. In Calgary, back in those days, nurses would come to your home and give you some respite, an hour to go away. And so I just happened to be chatting with the nurse one day, and she said, well, with her hepatitis C and everything, I just flipped out and said, I've got kids in the house. I need to know what's going on. I need her medical records. So the doctors in Kingston gave me her entire file. The booklet was 2 inches thick. Cancer treatment. Brought to emergency by the police. Ambulance people finding her naked in the hallway. with a knife in her hand saying, "They're going to kill me." If it wasn't for the Hotel Dieu Catholic Charity in Kingston, she would have died on the street. They paid for a social worker to hand her over to me. Otherwise, she would run away again. When you get institutionalized, when your benefits run out, you go to a new town and set up a new file. Kingston was his last stop on the railway. That was her life.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
If I may mention the name of Tracy Stonehouse, she is the beautiful social worker in Ontario that fought to have Penny delivered to me, hand delivered to me, so she could come home to be with her family.
You learned that the man who raised you and abused you was not your biological father. You alluded to that earlier. It's a complicated story, but it came after you started telling Sharon your story.
Yeah, did it ever?
Yeah, tell us.
So, it's decided that Sharon and I are going to write this book together. And I had already been on Ancestry, just very curious about just my ancestors and seeing who I could find. I was looking under my maiden name, which is McCrae. And I knew there was a lot of McCraes in there. I'd actually been approached by McCrae out of the United States who said, do you want to share with me? Get on Ancestry. We're all there doing our DNA and da-da-da. So I had also gone back to a letter that my aunt had given me after I found my family back when I was 35, where she told me in that letter that my mother's first child was taken when she gave birth. My mom was told that he died at birth, but he did not die. So I took it upon myself to start looking for him on Ancestry. And I thought, what better way than to get a DNA test? Maybe he's looking for his family. Boy, oh boy, careful what you wish for. Because when my DNA came back, there were no McCrae anywhere, and there were thousands of Gallants. And the highest match, the numbers were so high that this person had to be a brother or close, and so that's how the whole thing unraveled. Within a couple months, I pretty much knew in my heart who my dad was. Yeah.
You didn't get to meet him either, as it turned out.
I missed him by a few months. But I've been thinking about that a lot, and I mentioned it to my brother who I've met, my half-brother, and I really think that my gods were taking care of that, because I wouldn't want an elderly, sick man to be thinking about this horrible story in his last breath. Like, why? What's the point?
Right.
So I think it's worked out the way it's supposed to.
Talk to us about becoming a wig maker.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, my hair falls out. I have this big, some people have long legs, some people have voluptuous lips. Well, I had hair. It was gorgeous, big, natural curly hair. And after everything, I think after everything settled down, after my husband passed, and I think you just kind of go, okay, I made it through this stage. And as my daughter was struggling, my hair just fell out. Hated the off-the-rack wigs. Just, they were really expensive. They didn't fit. I didn't feel myself. I couldn't turn my head too fast for fear that it would stay, what I mean? And then I had the opportunity to move to beautiful lake country with my guy Jim, and found myself after a few renovations with nothing to do. The first time in my life since I was 14 that I hadn't had a full-time job. And I just happened to be on the internet looking at trying to buy a new wig, find a new wig provider. And there's all these videos, especially the Black community, those beautiful women and the cross-dressers have made wig making. It's just blowing up on the internet. It's everywhere. So I found this beautiful woman out of the States who has his wig making course. So I bought it for $99 and looked at it, and I thought, I can do this. And here we are today. And this is my latest girl.
What's temple hair?
Temple hair. Well, it's the first purchase I ever made for hair. And in some, Indian countries, the women become of a certain age, and most Indian girls, their hair is really, really long. And it's a coming of age, and it's a giving to the church and a giving to the community where they cut their hair off. And it's a way for the church to make money and to do charitable giving. Now, that's not to say that just because they say it's temple hair, it is temple hair. It's a very tricky buying human hair because you really don't know where it comes from. My last couple of purchases, I've been very lucky to actually meet the women here in Canada. One woman I met for coffee, and she let me be there when her mom cut it off. And another was a young girl, through her mom on the internet. Her mom was teaching this young girl to give and to do something good for the community, and I bought this little girl's ponytail. So together, made my latest wig.
That's amazing. And how all this turns into ultimately a creative and healing act is just really beautiful. Where does your relentlessness come from? Your
Paul, if I knew, I'd bottle it and sell it. I really think I've been lucky enough, I've been blessed to have people outside of my home from a very early age watch over me. And I didn't realize that was going on until I looked back and went, how did I survive this? But, just recently, I reached out to my junior high volleyball coach. And now, looking hindsight, is a powerful thing. But I look back to the little talks she gave me on the way, and I was really good at volleyball, so it kept my head on. And fitness, I tell you, next to music, fitness, oh my God, saved my life. So my teachers were so important to me. The woman who looked at me one day when I was almost 16 and said, Janet, if you don't want to go home, you don't have to go home. And I never did. I was so blessed to be able to go into a friend's house for a sleepover and see a normal, I got my little quote fingers up, family. I always knew there was something better than what I had. And I don't know where I got it, because I remember finding out I was pregnant with Samantha when I was 25, and I remember right then and there saying, okay, this is it. I'm going to do this right, and I'm going to show those son of a bitches what they've done wrong. And I've never forgotten that promise to myself. I hope I've answered that for you, because I don't know.
Well, you're cursing now, which is a good sign for our level of intimacy. So that's a good thing. And while we're on the subject, you say in a poem, I have so many fuck yous in my life, more than ever I'm discovering where I come from and what family is supposed to mean. That's my question.
Yeah.
What does family mean to you?
Oh my gosh. For me, even though I have a beautiful family around me that is my family's choice, but for me, when you've grown up without your mom, without love and nurturing, you don't really feel like you're part of a family. You don't recognize yourself in anything. So for me, to go to my Auntie May's house, my 86-year-old Auntie May, now that's on my mom's side. And remember, I didn't know anyone from my mom's side until I was in my 30s. She looks like me, and she looks like Penny. And she looks at me and says, my God, you look like your mother. And then I take off my wig, and I look at myself and all of these beautiful Gallants I've found. I look like them. I feel like them. They look like me. There's just something something deep, habitual, something instinctual that you just know you're home. So that challenged me. I finally feel like I'm at home on both sides.
Yeah, you say that you've been protected. The gods are looking out for you. You thanked your volleyball
Yeah.
teacher, but you also knew. You mentioned that you just gave the project to Sharon once you told your story, and you had that trust. It seems to
Yeah.
me that that inner sense that you could trust Sharon Thesen with this is related to that feeling of knowing when it's safe and knowing when to make certain moves and being connected to to
Absolutely.
a higher being or however you want to say it.
I think one of the greatest gifts that I was born with is an intuition and a gut that has kept me out of a lot of trouble. Yeah, I think when you put it that way, you've helped me answer that question. It's my gut. I've always had it.
Yeah.
I've always had it.
Well, it's a real delight to have this moment with you, and I'm very grateful for your time and for how you've dealt with the shit that was given you in this lifetime. It's a really beautiful story. I recommend it highly, and I thank you.
And I thank you. Thank you, Paul.